Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Today we're going to read some amazing channelings from Quo. Quo is a principle of social memory complexes of higher density beings. To simplify that, this is some channelings from a group called LL Research of beings that claim to be from a higher density, that have amazing spiritual wisdom and answer deep questions of a spiritual nature. You can check out my playlist on the channel. We've covered a variety of amazing topics through these quote channelings, and there are thousands of them. Today we're going to talk about desire, a very fundamental aspect of third density experience. Our desires are an important part of our spiritual journey. They create distortions and affect our behavior. It's part of how we choose what we want to create. But how do we know what our proper desire should be and how to balance desire? There's a variety of different topics surrounding the nature of our desires. Are desires good or bad? Quo tries to answer some elements of this question. We begin with a channeling given on October 3rd, 1999. Our question this week has to do with desire. We would like to know what it is to balance desire. A lot of times we think we know what we want. We think we understand that if we had a certain ability or a certain thing, we would be able to function more efficiently. We would be more whole. We would be more balanced. And then when we do achieve that, it turns out to be other than what we thought. We would like Quo to give us information about working with our desires. How do we determine what we really want rather than what we think that we want? Carla channeling begins. We are those known to you as the principle of Quo. We greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. We cannot say how blessed we feel to be called to your circle of seeking on this day of your fall, as the creation about you has begun to release its summer heat and to prepare itself for the sleep of winter. The desire of each tree and bush and flower for growing and turning to the light must gaze at this time of autumn, knowing its time of sleeping and regeneration is soon to arrive. And while the ground and the second density trees and creatures of the shrub and forest have no trouble adjusting their desires to fit the harmony of temperature and inner direction, the third density humans upon your sphere do indeed have no winter of sleep and regeneration, but rather an endless or seemingly endless succession of hopes, ideals, wishes, and desires of all kind that seem to know no season and sometimes seem to give one no rest. We are most happy to speak to you upon the subject of desire. We ask only one thing, and that is that you listen to what we have to say with a jaundiced and careful ear and heart, for we would not wish to place a stumbling block before any who seeks. Rather, we wish to offer thoughts that have been useful in our own development. It is our service to you to do this. We are delighted to do this, but we do not wish to pretend to be authorities, for we are not authorities, but those who walk with you upon a spiritual path that, as far as we know, is endless. The rising and falling of desire can well be said to be the hallmark of the experience of being self-conscious. Not only your third density human experience, but also the experience of higher densities. There is ever the finer tuning of desire, the finer delineation of the shape of energy of desire. Indeed, it may be said that in a very powerful way, desire is necessary to the third density experience, or to the fourth, fifth, sixth density experience. So let us move back to take a longer view of this that is called desire. This instrument has received from those who have had unusual experiences, and we find in her memory a recent letter that gives us a good place to start speaking of desire. This entity was able to move out of his body in a daydream-like state, not in a sleeping state, but in a very relaxed and self-confident state. He was able to leave the area in which his body was placed and eventually to leave the planet. At first, he could not move beyond a certain distance, but then he wrote to this instrument that in the metaphysical or time-space continuum, the mode of motivation or movement was love. Love therefore took him by his will on a tour right up to the point at which he felt that he could not and would not go further. We offered this experience in order to be able to talk about the relationship, about the great original thought or logos, which is love or desire. Desire feels when one is in an incarnation and experiencing the momentary arising of it, very straightforwardly a desire for acquisition. It feels like it has an object, in other words, and for the most part, those things which entities among your peoples desire have what this instrument would call a simple location. One desires a meal or a girlfriend, or to go someplace or to read a certain book. These are things in the outer world that can be achieved and brought into the dwelling place and possessed. And as the one known as R noted, it seems that these desires have a very short shelf life after the acquisition of the object. Once the object is acquired, it is no longer desired. As long as desire remains at this level and is seen as that which is desire of an object, we have to approach the subject in a certain way. And that would be to speak of certain ways of estimating the value of various desires. However, there is another level of desire with which those present all have considerable experience, and that is the desire for purity, for truth, for beauty, for light, for true love between people, for true relationships between people. And this level of desire has a life that is denied to desires for things which can be acquired in the physical world. This level of desire places a seeker in a different world where she is able to see objects, both metaphysical and physical, not with the eye of the physical world, but with the eye of the heart. What the one known as Ken Wilber has called the eye of contemplation. These desires for a higher way are wise desires, and we would encourage each of you to stoke these fires of hope and faith and will, and ask for your highest desires with abandon and greed. For these desires for a higher way of being, a higher method of seeing, will cool the fire in the oven of desire, so that you as an instrument of the divine are tempered and strengthened. You shall not, to the best of our knowledge, probably ever be able to experience a lack of desire, for you dwell within a physical vehicle which must eat, which must have a place, which must put on to the body protective clothing against the elements. As long as you carry the structure of flesh, the chemical, the biological reactions which move the physical vehicle from infanthood to growth to decay to death will continue unabated, that being the nature of that physical vehicle and the nature of the physical world into which this vehicle has been born. The poet, which this instrument knows as Tennyson, called the nature in red in tooth and claw. Everything must eat, and so the universe of the body is full of that which is eaten and that which eats. It is full of the tiniest organization of molecules which make up the simplest life form, having unending desire, and with each iota of consciousness there come new and greater levels of physical desire. There is no harm, error, or sin in desire. It is simply logical to satisfy appetites. Each organism has instinctual appetites, and the fulfilling of them is appropriate, and shall we say planned for by the infinite Creator. Indeed, desires are to be protected in that it is well for all that draws breath, shall we say, within your physical world, to have that which is needed to sustain life. The kind of desire that tends to provide excellent catalyst for growth and good food for thought is what we might term mental emotional desire. The one known as R spoke of that desire to get those things which he might need at a later time. The one known as S spoke of the desire to come into a more integrated or full understanding that would illuminate the experience that he was having, that would make things make more sense. As the one known as R noted, when these particular desires were dropped, others would take their place. And in this context, we would use something else out of this instrument's memory, a story that is given as what this instrument calls a koan, a parable, shall we say, that helps seekers to gain realization. The story in brief is that there was a holy man, an anchorite, one who had been given a room where he might put his bones and a daily bowl of meager soup and bread that kept his body and soul together. And in this room this entity sat in meditation all his waking hours, waiting on the truth, resting in the divine, at peace, and feeling no rising desire. Years went by, and then one day the door to his humble room burst open, and into the room came a woman he had never seen before. She placed a baby in his arms. She had told her parents that this holy man was the father of her child, and she was giving the child to him. After contemplating this gift for a time, this holy man set out for the seacoast very near the street on which he lived, and obtained work of the most humble kind, carrying heavy things on and off the ships that traded at the port. With the money that he made, he purchased food and fed and clothed and tended the child that had been given to him. Several years went forward in this way, and then one day his door burst open again, and this woman entered again. Having decided that she wished for her child after all, he gave her the child, who was now past this toddler stage, arranged his limbs for meditation, and rejoined the light that he had left behind when the gift of the child was his. To the one who has no arising desire, the universe is free. It is a gift, and every blade of grass, every ray of sunlight, every kind word, every gentle glance is a beauty and a truth. When you have no arising desires, you may feel the grass and the elements, the dance of the wind, the dance of fire, the dance of water, and the dance of the earth. The universe lies before you, infinitely complex, infinitely unified, at one with itself, at one with you, part of you as you are part of it. May we say that we do not expect many moving through third density who experience this state of no desire for longer than, say, a moment, an hour, or an afternoon. Times of feeling this peace indeed are gifts that come now and again. And while you were experiencing this peace, you wondered why you ever desired anything. But that setting of full and open heart of faith, that ultimate balancing will that would allow such a state, are genuinely not helpful for the purposes of evolution in spiritual terms. The design of your physical vehicle as human beings is not an error or a whim, but rather it is the result of experimentation on the part of what this instrument would call the deity. Creations before this one that you now experience have tried various kinds of ways in which entities could accelerate the pace of their spiritual development, and so far what has been found is that placing a veil over the truth and the beauty and the ultimate goodness of all that exists is very helpful for the developing spirit. If you are as the trees and the flowers, then you know without having to reach that all is well, that all is one, that all is a dance. But humans with this knowledge will not move themselves forward spiritually, but rather tend to remain in the state in which they were born. It is actually the arising of desire creating discomfort that motivates entities on so many levels, and this motivation of people who wish to simplify or clarify or solve the perplexing questions of what to desire and how to desire it are what open people to new thoughts, new ideas, new practices, and new ways of looking at things. There is, of course, much skill, but more of art in learning your own self, of using the mind carefully in a limited fashion to analyze just what level this desire is on. How true to myself, the seeker, is this desire? How honest and pure is this desire? There are many ways to use the emotions in working with the desires of the heart, the emotions and the mind. We would like to take another half hour to speak of the desires to know, but we shall content ourselves here with saying that the intellectual and the emotional parts of the self often so combine as to create a very intense desire to know, and this desire has power both for good and for ill in terms of the evolution of the spirit. Here, we would perhaps offer a warning that we have offered many times, and that is the warning of the nature of the mind as compared to the nature of consciousness. It is easy to confuse the mind with consciousness, but they are separate things. You are, in terms of your physical vehicle, an almost hairless great ape. You have an excellent mind capable of abstract thought, self-reflection, and many, many other things. It is basically a choice-making tool. When faced with something the physical mind wants to solve the problem, it is not comfortable. It is not used to thinking about or analyzing or sitting with what is perceived as a desire that needs to be fulfilled. For your everyday existence, for meeting society's demands, and for keeping body and soul together, this is an excellent tool. It is not to be confused with the consciousness that you are. That which you are is not a citizen of time or place. You are not of this earth. You are not of this era. Before time began, you existed. In all possible creations, you exist. You are one with the infinite Creator. Being able to separate these two strands of being is sometimes extremely helpful when you are working with desires. For that which you are as a citizen of eternity is, in itself, what this instrument would call a safe place to rest from this seemingly ceaseless process of arising desire and the satisfaction or the disappearance of desire. Be sure that when you use the mind, you use it as you would any tool or resource. Be sure that you do not allow the mind to use you. For as we said, the mind of the physical vehicle has a life of its own, and it can and it will drive your consciousness to distraction. If you allow the mind to race away with you, it is a good tool. It is a poor, poor master. Rather, we would suggest that you come to the working with desire from the heart, because the heart is that point within the energy system of the body, wherein the one infinite Creator dwells and awaits the reaching of the hopeful heart. It is as though that which you most keenly desire with your spirit and your soul is already within you, more yours than your breathing or your heartbeat, closer to you than your own bones and flesh, so that the judgment and analysis and understanding that you have within you and can apply to questions that you have about desire are in place, waiting for you to achieve the quietness and confidence of self to turn to them and to allow them their full sway. Whether a seeker decides to get this car or that computer or that larger tent in a very important way makes almost no difference in the spiritual life of the seeker that makes these choices. But when you move into the area of desires for qualities, for truth, for higher spiritual capacity, then you are beginning to work with desires that are very helpful in terms of acceleration of your spiritual self, the moving forward of that process of the evolution of the spirit for which you took flesh in the first place. When next you have these desires for things or for qualities, gaze at them from a secure and restful place from within your own heart, knowing that you have all that you need if you are one with the infinite Creator, yet knowing that you dance the dance of life. And while you are moving through the steps of this beautiful and intricate dance, desires shall arise and may well be satisfied. Know that this is not only accepted but protected activity, that you have not cast yourself into the outer reaches of foolishness simply because of desire, for it is your nature and your glory to desire. But what shall you desire? There is always the choice. We would at this time offer and also leave this instrument. Our offer, as always, is if there is a desire for help as you are seeking, say, to deepen a meditation or a contemplation, we are happy if you will call on us to be with you. Not to speak with you, but simply to add our meditation to your own. For in many cases, this actually helps in stabilizing and deepening a meditative state, and is part of that which we are allowed to do without infringing upon free will. Call us mentally to you by our name, and we are glad to be with you at any time. Question: I've been participating with a group which purports to be Zetas, and I have doubts about the service orientations of those of that group. Could you give me your perspective? I am Quo, and am aware of your query, my brother. It is our great desire to be of service through speaking to groups such as this one. For in so speaking, we have the opportunity to walk with each a certain distance, shall we say, upon the journey of seeking. And if we may speak in a manner which offers catalyst and inspiriting, we feel blessed. We at all times seek to avoid infringing upon the free will of any entity to whom we speak. There are many ways in which free will may be abridged, and we are aware that if we give a blessing or a warning to an entity such as yourself, who is working with other groups, then perhaps our speaking will carry too much weight in that regard. Therefore, in matters such as this, we leave the process of discrimination to you, my brother, for we are aware that you are able to assess the nature of any information which comes within your provenance. Thus, we must apologize for not being able to give you that which you seek in this case, for we would not take from you the opportunity to exercise your own powers of discrimination. Question: Yes, there has been a gentleman named C, a young man, who, through the internet, has been asking me for advice, spiritual and otherwise, and I am not quite sure how he fell into it, and I am concerned that I am giving him good advice. I ask for your thoughts on that. I am Quo, and I am aware of your query, my brother. We would suggest to you that as you have come in contact with this entity, that there is no mistake or happenstance about the crossing of your paths. This entity has been drawn to you, for there is within this entity's subconscious feelings the impulse to seek information from those sources which it values. Thus, as you speak with this entity and share with him that which is your best and highest information and inspiration, you give to him that which he seeks. You must also realize that this entity is, as yourself, one who is able to discriminate between that information that he receives that is helpful to him and that information that is not helpful to him. Thus, we encourage you in your sharing information with this entity. We move to a channeling given on October 4th, 1998. We would like Quo to give us information as to how we can determine what our true heart's desire is, that which is more central to the evolution of our soul rather than what we think we want as we go through our daily lives. We are wondering what you can tell us about determining and discovering what our true desire is. I am of those known to you as the principle of Quo. We greet you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator in whose service we are. We bless and thank you for calling us to your circle on this autumn day. The creation of your illusion is most beautiful at this harvest time of year, and we have enjoyed the glimpses that are within your minds of the beauty of these past days. Truly, yours is a lovely plane of illusion, and we greatly enjoy blending our vibrations with yours at this time. As always, we would ask that you listen to our words not as words of authority, but as opinions from fellow pilgrims along a dusty road. It is often that those who walk upon this road may be the hands and the voice of the Creator for others upon the road also, for each of you is most definitely a receiver and transmitter of energy. You ask this afternoon concerning energy, for that is the very heart of desire. The energy of desire fills the universe in which each entity lives. For that entity, the human body takes a certain kind of nourishment, craves a certain kind of liquid to quench the thirst of activity and work done. And just so the desires of the heart, both those known and those unknown, have tremendous power to shape circumstance in order that opportunities might be offered to learn more concerning those desires. Let us talk for a moment about desire and energy when we speak to you using this instrument's voice. The sound you are hearing is a vibratory energy. The bodies which you enjoy the use of during the experience are made of overlapping and cooperative fields of energy. As a unique citizen of eternity, you have a core vibration which is a distortion of the great original thought, which is love. Each of you distorts that core vibration of love in such and such a way, creating for yourselves a signature that is as unmistakable as the name and certainly more rich in information offered about the self in comparison to the naming. So your very nature is vibration, and indeed, the nature of all manifest and created things is energetic. All things are vibratory energy fields. Those upon your level appear solid and real, and yet they are tremendously vulnerable to that entity who knows the higher road, who is able to work with the level of self which overarches the current incarnation. And as each of you has evolved, you have had these times of realization of the great effect which your desires can have upon experience itself. And as this instrument is often known to say, you must be careful of what you desire, for you will get it. For this is the nature of this experience. The whole human nature is geared towards the satisfying of desires. The heritage from your second density body is a heritage of instinct to breathe, to eat, to procreate, and to survive. These are instinctual desires, but no more powerful than the desires that your consciousness had as it evolves. Now let us look at how entities desire, how they may go about determining what their true desire is. On the surface level, on that level which most entities of your density skate upon, not knowing that there is a universe under that skin of ice which is full of life and water and magic, desire is very plain and simple. When the personality says, I want this, the response is according to its personality. The acquisitive person shall go and get that which is desired straight away and figure out how to pay for it later. The more chary conserver of the nest egg will take the same desire, but will carefully set aside that energy that is needed to achieve the desire. For most of these walking upon the skin of life and not into the ocean of it, the desires are fairly simple and are in the physical world. But something happens which turns the surface skater into a swimmer that can swim to the depths. A spiritual awakening occurs as surely as an alarm clock goes off, and it is time to wake up. And as each has found in this process of awakening to the metaphysical side of life, the desires of the heart become much more complicated and much less easy to satisfy. Yet in the way of enculturated humankind, it is not unusual to see quite consciously aware entities still approaching the method of achieving desire in the same materialistic way that an entity would save up money to go see a certain movie, or to buy a certain product, or to get, as this instrument is so fond of getting, a new change of clothes. And the desires of the heart are not commodities. Indeed, the desires of the heart are constantly in evolution, just as your whole vibrator nexus of being is constantly in the process of becoming more of that which you truly are. This would seem to be difficult news to bear, for truly we do wish to satisfy our desires once they are known. But because life for the seeker has become metaphysical, not to the exclusion of the physicality, but in the sense that the metaphysical universe is known to overarch and to order the manifested illusion, it would indeed seem that there may be better ways of approaching the question of what does one desire than simply to take the opinion off the top of the consciousness and try to figure out ways of achieving this conceived desire. And indeed there are. Moving into a more skillful way of examining self and the self's milieu is quite possible and not particularly difficult for the one who is moving to be silent and to allow unknowing to remain as it is until it will change. Let us think along the lines of computers for a moment, as we often find that such an allegorical comparison is helpful when talking about the structure of the mind or the structure of consciousness. In the software of the computer, there are bells and whistles to help you do that which you wish to do upon the computer, but they are not all of the same level. And hidden in many programs are many powerful sub-programs that are not seen by the casual observer and are simply ignored with that ignorance that is bliss. They know that the deeper programs exist, and they know not what use they would be. They are still skating on the surface. They are still asleep, and each of you as seekers have plunged into those infinite waters of consciousness, and you have become aware of those deep voices within the mind, those presences, those principles that are personal and yet impersonal, that are the self and yet the oversoul of the self. And in the silence you can put the question, what do I truly desire? And then you can listen. Listening to that graceful and yet muscular silence is a discipline of the personality that will never disappoint the persistent listener. Simply allowing the distortions of the moment, the confusions of the day to slip away, can put one into the heart's sanctum sanctorum, that inner sacristy of silence and prayer where the Creator waits infinitely and patiently. The Creator awaits each of you within your own heart, within that deep silence that is within that room within the heart, for truly the Holy of Holies is within you, and within you are not only all of the instructions for this life and for this period of learning, but indeed all of the instructions whatsoever for the you that you are before time was. There is no end to that which can be sensed by one who is willing to stop and listen and remain without impulse. This instrument is very fond of an old Irish poem, the last verse of which is, "The peace of God is no peace but strife closed within the sod. So brothers, let us pray for one thing, the marvelous peace of God." As you activate the Holy of Holies within, as you tabernacle with the great Logos, which has created all that there is, you free from your deeper self and allow to move into conscious experience that self that is truly surrendered to service, to the service of the one infinite creator, to the service of learning and expanding and evolving that you have committed yourself to in a personal way during this incarnation. We would not wish to do your work for you. We cannot make choices for you, but we can encourage each to seek for herself an ever-deepening awareness of desire, for we feel that each will find that as he moves into that frame of mind that offers a different vantage point on the concerns of the day, that in truth each desire that has seemed to have been thwarted has in fact simply not been an opportunity that was part of destiny. And why would this occur? Why would the entity desire and try to achieve that desire and feel so completely failed when the attempts do not work? It is because there is this assumption that desire equals the need to fulfill the desire. As before, we would say to a person skating upon the surface of life, this is a logical and useful attitude. To those wishing to live a life in faith and service, the attitude simply does not encompass the experience that you have set up for yourself as a seeker. Does this then mean that as one has awakened to one's metaphysical identity, one ceases to be able to achieve that which one desires? We cannot answer this for you, for some have a very clear idea of the deeper desires, and others perhaps not as clear an understanding of their deeper desires. When you reach the bottom of the personal life, the incarnational mind, you find that the universe within is created as though for the first time in such a way that you have connections into the impersonal and creator-filled realms that guide events within this realm. When you come to the end of your human ability to reason and to understand, you will come to a point of surrender, and this point of surrender is a peak. Working with the personality to see into the deeper energies of the self, you open and enable for yourself the underlying desire that feeds all of life. This level of desire is that which wounds in the flower, that which springs from the smile or from the eyes. Each time you're able to get to the bottom of desire, you will find that the base of that desire is the desire to cooperate faithfully and persistently with the destiny that has brought you all which you have so far enjoyed. At the back end of that great long train of desires, you will find a little gay caboose that says, "I surrender, not my will, but thine." Perhaps this is bad news for those who wish to affect their lives in such and such a way. But we believe this to be the way things are in the metaphysical realm, for in that realm, thoughts are things. Intentions of actions and desire is turned upon its head, blending for the citizen of eternity the desires of the self and the desires of the creator, and as these two come slowly into synchronization, destiny becomes fluid, and one finds oneself more and more easily able to pierce the illusions of desire to move into that heart which desires completely one thing: the opportunity to love and be loved, to have consciousness, to breathe in and to breathe out, and all else will be as it will be. One last thought concerning desire. The one known as Ken Keyes has done a good deal of work in looking at desire, and this instrument has a good opinion of that which this author says, which is this: that desires in and of themselves are neither bad nor good. They simply are things which create a bias. If one moves too far along that route of desire, the bias becomes an addiction. So in many ways, the managing of the two rambunctious desires of the somewhat less evolved person may be seen to be of an addictive quality. The feeling is, if I have this, I will be all right. If I do not have this, I shall not be all right. This author then encourages the addict to downgrade that addiction to preference. One can say, I prefer that this thing happen in this way, but I am not addicted to it. It is not necessary. This too, in its own way, is a key, For when you look at desire with the conscious mind, it is difficult to see what energy that energy is. But you will find there are addictions in the personality just as there are in eating foodstuffs, and certainly life becomes a more, shall we say, comfortable illusion when one is able to see clearly one's preferences and yet have the center quality of balance that allows one to surrender. Question. For several years I've said that I want to write a book about wanderers for wanderers, but my time keeps getting caught up in so many other wonderful things to do. I would appreciate your thoughts. This is obviously something I am not addicted to, but I would prefer to finish the book sometime before I leave this incarnation. Any comments on that quote? I am quo and am aware of your query, my sister, and it is our desire to be service in our response without infringing upon the way of confusion, that is, upon your free will choices. For there are indeed many possibilities which present themselves at this time to your attention for the fulfilling as a means of being of service. That which you have found yourself doing is the reaching out to those who reach first to you, offering advice and opinions much as do we when this circle of seeking has called us as you have called us this day. We would remind you, my sister, that the ability to serve one is the ability to serve all. And there is, in our humble opinion, no necessity for concern upon your part as to how you shall serve, for service and its opportunities shall continue to present themselves to you. You're in the position of being able to choose how you wish to refine, or indeed how you wish to present your service to those who would seek your advice, your opinion, your suggestion. If it is indeed your heart's desire that you write the book for wanderers, then you will find a way for this to be accomplished, as you have done so in the past with other projects of the nature of the book. However, if you find that there are other ways in which you wish to serve, these also may be explored without any feeling of that which must be done. For as we are familiar with it, there is a saying from the one known to this instrument as John Lennon, that life is what happens to you while you are busy making other plans. And this is indeed true for most entities who seek to be of service. The seeking to serve is that which is of primary importance. It is that which draws to you opportunities to serve. The opportunity which you choose, the avenue which you go down, is that which is right for you. For you have chosen it, and it has chosen you. We realize we have not added a great deal of insight to your understanding of this situation, but we wish to remain within the bounds of free will in our response. Is there any further query, my sister? No. I appreciate not wanting to infringe upon free will, and I wouldn't want you to either. I appreciate what you said, and I think it is in my nature to write to one person who is asking the question and put my whole heart into that, than to sit down and write for the unknown people who read my book. I know that if I gathered up all that I've written to various wanderers, I would have a book, so I guess I can rest easy. Do you have any comment? I am quo and am aware of your query and would simply respond by suggesting that to serve one is to serve all. Thank you, that gives me peace. Question. How does one distinguish between answers that come from the higher self without filtering from the ego? I am quo and believe that we understand your query, my brother. The messages that one receives in the meditative state, the prayerful state, the contemplative state, the inspiration that strikes one in the midst of the day, these sources and means of receiving information may be examined again in the meditative state for the depth of purity. For there is within each entity the tree of mind, which moves ever more deeply to make contact with the deepest resources available to one. Whether this is the higher self, the guide, the teacher, or whatever source of inspiration one has sought, it is within the meditative state that one determines the relative purity of or use for this information. For there is within your illusion no clear and certain means to know at each communication what is, shall we say, flavored with the interpretation of what you have called the ego and what we would call the personality structure. Indeed, in some instance, it is helpful for this flavoring to occur, for it aids the entity in moving in such and such a fashion. When there is the necessity for a message to be imparted with relative purity, one may trust and have faith that this will be done by that source which one seeks, be it the higher self or other sources, and that one may look at this information when it is perceived in the meditative state and determine that this is from the higher self. There are opportunities for each entity to feel that information is more or less helpful according to the origination, the source of the information. We encourage each seeker of the truth to use a healthy dose of discrimination on whatever information comes before your notice. We would further add that we would suggest that all information that comes before one has a value to the entity that notices it. Whether this value is to take the information literally or whether to interpret it with the flavor of the personality structure is for each entity to determine. For indeed, all that speaks to one is the one creator. Each message can have value if followed to its ultimate source. All information can be helpful, and all information can be discriminated, can be evaluated by means of the meditation, the contemplation, and the prayer. Again, my brother, we realize that we have not biased you in one way or another, or given a technique by which information may be discarded or retained unerringly. This is always within the bounds of one's free will. We wish both to emphasize the value of discrimination and the value of the many voices of the one creator about each seeker of truth. Question: it is reasonable for me to ask, over the last few years, what is the percentile of accuracy of determining my higher self's messages to me? I am and am aware of your query, my brother, and we must refrain from giving such a percentile, for we do not wish to seem to judge, and we are aware that each seeker, such as yourself, must needs make these choices for himself or herself. We again would reiterate that it is as important for each seeker to determine the framework for seeking that upon which it shall build its metaphysical personality as it is for a seeker to receive information from any source other than itself that might aid in the building of this structure. What we mean to say here is that your choices made with consideration, with love, with consideration for the harmony and unity of all things, these choices are as important to you as any information you shall receive. How you choose what you choose, you can construct the basic foundation out of the desire to know the truth and the faith that it will come to you as certainly as any structure be built by any discarnate entity with information to share. Question: I just want to thank you for the inspiration such as you provide. I find it very useful. I guess it's my desire to say it again. I am Quo, and we appreciate your heartfelt sentiments, my brother. We seek to serve those such as yourself and those in this circle of seeking in the most helpful way that we can. As you discussed previously to this session, the desire to serve is that which propels entities who wish to seek the light and the love of the one Creator. The means by which the service is rendered is not often easily determined and is indeed a delicate process, one which challenges the imagination of all true seekers. Is there another query at this time? One more. When one is at a higher level of consciousness, as opposed to those of us in third density, the third density person must operate without clear sight. Can we still give advice in this condition and not get carried away with error? How are we doing? I am Quo, and I'm aware of your query, my brother. Again, we would remind each that there are no mistakes for any portion of the one Creator which seeks its source and its unity with all. There is in this illusion that you now inhabit the great desire to seek, to love, and to be loved, for this is the lesson before you. The ability to know whether or not one has served well is not a portion of this illusion, for it is that which partakes of wisdom. In this illusion, one cannot know anything for certain. One can seek, one can desire, one can build the framework, the foundation for the metaphysical self, and build this foundation securely without knowing anything in detail or in particular. For there is in this illusion the great interplay and interchange of energies, as each relates in one form of relationship to each other entity within the illusion. The many steps forward, backward, sideways, missteps, bumped feelings and knees, all of this great cacophony of experience is that which eventually informs each entity precisely as that entity needs to be informed. It is a great dance of the one Creator and its many portions with itself. And though there seem to be many missteps and paths traveled that one may not wish to travel beforehand by entities, indeed each step is taken with perfection. The ability to learn from what you call the mistake is oftentimes more valuable than avoiding the mistake, as it is called originally. We are aware that there are forces, subconscious energies in each entity. There are teachers of an unseen nature for each entity. All work in this great musical effort, this great dance that all participate in, that allows each to exchange energies with others that are necessary to be exchanged. We applaud each entity's desire to move in a certain direction, metaphysically speaking. However, it is not so much the direction that is important as it is the desire that is important, the faith that such movement is possible, the faith that it occurs, though one may not see it or measure it in any knowledgeable degree. However, the faith that such movement is possible and the desire to move in the direction of love and light is that which is of importance. Is there a final query at this time? I am Quo, and we would take this opportunity once again to thank you for inviting our presence to your circle of seeking this day. We would again assure each entity that each walks with many companions upon this unseen and dusty trail of seeking truth. There are with you many who have traveled this trail before and now return to walk again to aid you in some small way that you may perhaps find the right person, the right book, the right roadmap for that moment. In your quiet moments, give thanks and praise for each entity, for they are indeed an angelic company who walk with you at this time. They have walked with you since before time and shall walk with you through all time. We are known to you as those of Quo. We leave each of you at this time in the love and the light of the one infinite creator, Adonai, my friends, Adonai. So these two channelings really give us some amazing information about desire. It's interesting, for many, there is a sort of split in the law of attraction community and in the spiritual community about the nature of desire. One of the first things I remember as I started to read Neville Goddard was, here we believe that desire is a good thing. Neville Goddard emphasizes that desire is telling you what you can achieve, what you can create, and it guides your spiritual path. The interesting analogy that is given in the first channeling here is the story of the man who has no desire, that sits in meditation. We do have those moments where the desire leaves us and we can feel every blade of grass and the wind and the sun and all these things, and it fills us with pleasure. But it is in the nature of a thinking organism to desire, to breathe, to eat, to drink. Those are parts of us and we can't escape them. Desire is not a bad thing. There are some spiritual communities that will say that your desires are all bad. Anything you desire is bad. That's simply not true. There are levels of your desire, and as you learn about the nature of your desire, you learn about yourself as a soul and an entity. So, the great analogy given in the second channeling here is that you can make it a preference. Some people so doggedly seek out that desire that they want that when they don't get it or they do it incorrectly, it frustrates them and it can lead to distortions on their spiritual path. If you can look at preferences, I prefer that pizza, yeah, but I can have a poke bowl instead. That will help you along your path. It's about the level of importance that you give to your desires, but the desire itself gives us an understanding of creation itself. As we seek to achieve these desires, we learn the nature of our thought and action. There's so many aspects to desire, but the real question that we get in the second channeling is, what is your heart's true desire? You have many different desires, books that you want to read, shows that you want to watch, food that you want to eat, but there are also other levels of desire, deep desires. And for many, it's a very simple thing, as we have learned in the law of one material. It's a desire to serve the self or serve others. If you can feel the great pleasure of serving others in some way, shape, or form, and when I say serve, that doesn't mean volunteering at the food kitchen. There's so many things you can do to serve, but when you do some level of service and you feel the joy that it gives you, you suddenly have this great desire to serve more. So as I've learned, my great desire is to serve in the ways that I can serve best, and as I have sought that out, great things happen. I love the idea of desire that Frederick Dodson describes, that if you desire something, it means that in some reality that you already have it, and that it's a signal that you can achieve it, that you can have it. I love that because I've had desires for things that seemingly felt impossible, but the desire itself was a calling, a signal for me that I could achieve or accomplish or experience this thing that I was desiring. We all are playing with our desires, learning as our desires. I don't know, at the time that you've listened to this episode, I will have a meditation that I call the angelic ladder of desire. And that is evaluating your desires through a variety of different filters. As I have learned, this particular ritual works. I try to really look at the powers of my desires and the natures of my desires. Once I have a desire that I find important, that is resonant with my heart, I try to bring perspective to it, to bring clarity to it. I try to bring courage to my desire, and then intuition and calm. I try to bring simplicity to it, to bring fortune to it, to bring understanding to it, and wisdom. When I evaluate it through different components like that, sometimes you can take a desire that you have and you can refine it to get a clear understanding of this desire. Desire is a part of the spiritual path. It helps us to understand. When you pray, I promise you, a lot of times that a desire may be a part of that. You may be praying for someone else, but that is a desire. So understanding the nature of desires is important. And I ask you, what do you think about desires? What does it mean to you? How do we evaluate our desires? Telling me your experiences with understanding your desires. Is it better to let go of your desires completely or to refine your understanding of these desires? In any case, you can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.